In what was threatening to be a bland, uninspired Imola race day, we saw a gripping grandstand finish, with Lando Norris threatening to double his race win tally just 1 week after his first. But it wasn't meant to be, with Max Verstappen achieving his hardest fought race victory in quite some time, as this season is starting to unfold in a far less one-sided way than originally assumed by pretty much everyone in the sport. The benefits of the upgrades brought by the teams have been sizable, and the field is now closed up to Red Bull at least over the past 2 race weekends, where the difference between success and abject failure out of the blue has been the capability of the team's star driver, Max Verstappen. It seems it wasn't just Max's maturity and experience behind the wheel that made all the difference today, as it is certainly questionable if anyone else would have been able to maintain P1 in the way that Max did, or even be able to claim it in the first place. In what has been heralded as snooze fest by the mainstream, we think there was actually quite a lot to feast on at the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. Want to know just how the race at Imola unfolded? It ended in a thrilling way, but there was plenty of enjoyment to be had throughout, if you knew where to look. And stick around, because it isn't all sunshine and rainbows at Red Bull despite the hard-fought victory. They'll be hoping this weekend isn't a sign of things to come. So just how did the events at Imola unfold? Well, Max scared the living daylights out of us by creating an eerily familiar 5-second gap, having got the advantage over the second place Norris off the line in the second phase of the launch. Throughout the first 2/3 of the race, the main battleground was between 2nd and 5th, where McLaren and Ferrari duked it out for the other 2 podium positions, both on track and in the strategy departments, with Charles Leclerc posing the greatest threat to McLaren as Oscar Piastri comprehensively gapped Carlos Sainz following the pit stops, giving an early indicator of what Norris would go on to do later in the race, as he gained perplexing pace compared to the rest of the field. Further back, Mercedes seemed to have got on top of their car and got it under control, as they cruised to a predicted 6th and 7th despite a slip-up at Aqua Minerale for Hamilton, which has now cemented them as the 4th fastest team after Aston Martin's bafflingly terrible weekend, one which was spoken with such high hope due to their upgrades, which seemed to never truly get going. Highlights further back were Yuki Tsunoda having yet another solid weekend, despite aggravating Max Verstappen with his blue flag demeanor, as well as plenty of close fights between the back half of the field. The real highlight of the race was the final third, which saw Lando Norris finding a second win after losing time to Leclerc behind him and putting on a charge to challenging a struggling Max Verstappen, who was not only losing grip in his tyres, but was having issues similar to the ones seen earlier in the weekend, where he struggled to get the car turned into corners, which is especially important on a track like Imola. The main thing we've learned recently is that Red Bull are human after all, with their dominant streak seeming to have been shocked out of them by the recent upgrades by Ferrari and especially McLaren. As Red Bull lost their fuel load as the race went on, Sergio was rendered stuck in place and Verstappen started to slip backwards, seemingly due to the car not gripping in the same way as when the car was heavier. While this is something that can be experienced as the tyres go off and the car gets lighter, it seemed to be exaggerated in Verstappen's Red Bull, who had already been leaning on track limits in an attempt to maintain his lead in a more uncomfortable than usual car. The hard work of Sebastian Buemi in the Red Bull simulator seemed to have paid off as Red Bull looked back to their best at the early stages of the race. However, it seems that there are still a lot of kinks to be ironed out, something the team will hope to do quickly. It's perhaps fortunate that the next race is Monaco, somewhere that Red Bull has been historically strong. As long as Max can recreate his qualifying heroics, then the issues in the car may be rendered redundant on a difficult to overtake Monaco circuit. While Norris missed out by a small margin, he was confident that had he a few extra laps to play with, the top step of the podium would be his. 1 or 2 more laps, I think I would have had him. Tough, shame. Lost out a bit too much to Max in the beginning. It was a tough first half and much better second half. Just not today. We're at a point now where we're in a position of Ferrari and Red Bull. It's what we have to get used to. It's business as usual, focusing on doing the same things, fighting for first or second now. It's frustrating not to win, but after the improvements we've made, it's what we should expect. And it wasn't just Norris who thought that the end was a close call, as Verstappen sounded exhausted on the post-race radio. "Fuck mate, I had to work for that. We did a great race considering how the weekend started. Had to work for that." And maybe he wouldn't have had to work quite so hard for it if he wasn't racing all alone, as the Red Bull team for the second week in a row were rendered partially toothless. The strategy department recently seems to be reduced to just drive fast enough until we can come out in the clean air, Max, you're on your own, as Sergio Perez was yet again in the 5th fastest car it seems. Never mind his teammate battling it out for wins on a weekend where the car is inconsistent and unwieldy at best, Perez, in a car that has been the dominant vehicle ever since the new aero regulations, looked in jeopardy of repeating history. If you cast your mind back to last year, Sergio had a good start to the season, steadying the ship when he was under scrutiny from patchy performances the year before. Then Miami came around and it was all downhill from there. Now, don't get me wrong, I like Sergio, and it's still far too early to dig his grave, but surely there must be a point where Red Bull gets sick of their driver blaming their car. Following the race, Christian Horner made his disappointment in Perez's weekend clear, however wasn't too harsh on the Mexican driver, as he said, "It was a shame for Checo, effectively being out of kilter following qualifying. We ran the reverse strategy for him. We got P8 and P7 was theoretically the best we could see before the race on our analysis. We need him to be up there supporting Max in the same way the two Ferraris and two McLarens are together." But that is precisely the problem that Perez now faces. It was all fine and well to be half a second off Verstappen in qualifying when Verstappen was a whole second ahead of the rest of the field. Now the rest of the teams have closed the gap, both in qualifying and the race day. Sergio has to do what he has so far failed to do for most of his time at Red Bull, close the gap on Verstappen, because now the rest of the field has. When Horner was questioned as to what Sergio has to do to retain his Red Bull seat for 2025, this is what he had to say. "He has had a much better start to this year bar this weekend, which has been an anomaly. He's been very strong, he's been more relaxed, less focused on what Max is doing and focusing on himself. He's responded to that." Which translates to us as Perez has learnt to behave and stay in his lane, but now behaving isn't going to be enough. Obviously Sergio had a good start to the year, but that was while Red Bull was still clearly the dominant force which wasn't being threatened from behind. Perez is clearly still the frontrunner for the seat, somewhat helped by there not being too many clear suitable replacements for him available. But questions being asked this early into the season surely cannot be comfortable and something he needs to squash expeditiously. The only thing that could really save Checo's blushes was the fact that Imola is typically a difficult circuit to overtake on. The issue is, however, that Checo has consistently been bad in qualifying throughout his Red Bull tenure when compared with his teammates, and with the field closer than it was before, there may be plenty of cases in the near future where Perez is in the same position. As well as that, trying to go long on a set of hards just to lose out on 3 net positions by going off track and losing 5 seconds instantly and more over the course of the tyres cleaning up doesn't just render it a Saturday problem. It's not like Perez finished the race mere tenths of a second off of 7th place, and he only finished in front of the 6 teams that are currently in no man's land themselves. Perez needs to bounce back and bounce back hard, otherwise Red Bull's lack of decision in regards to his future and other drivers leaving their futures open in the hopes that an opportunity will present itself may well leave Sergio Perez in a scarily familiar position. We hope that isn't the case, and it really is just a blip, but the only man that can save Perez's future is Sergio Perez himself. Let us know what you think about this. The court of social media is one thing and has already spoken, but we'd like to know thoughts from actual fans. Let us know what you think about Sergio Perez's future. Clearly, if he turns all this around within the next couple of races, he'll be fine. But what if he doesn't turn it around and in 5 races' time he's sitting 5th in the championship? We hope to see him bounce back, but for the time being, thank you for watching.